Have you ever wondered why some relationships between older women and younger men seem destined for psychological turmoil? Carl Jung, the renowned Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, had profound insights into these complex dynamics that most people completely misunderstand. Today, we're diving deep into Jung's revolutionary theories about what older women should never do when involved with younger men, and trust me, this knowledge could save you from devastating emotional consequences. Before we continue, if you're fascinated by the hidden psychology behind human relationships and want to understand the deeper patterns that govern our romantic lives, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. We explore the most profound psychological insights every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Jung believed that every relationship is a mirror reflecting our unconscious patterns, complexes, and archetypal energies. When an older woman enters a relationship with a younger man, she's not just dating someone chronologically junior to her. She's entering a psychological battlefield where ancient archetypal forces collide, where the anima and animus dance in potentially destructive ways, and where the shadow self can emerge with devastating consequences. The most dangerous mistake an older woman can make, according to Jung's analytical psychology, is to unconsciously slip into what he called the mother complex, while simultaneously denying her own psychological maturity. This creates a toxic dynamic where she begins mothering her younger partner while desperately trying to recapture her own youth through him. It's a psychological trap that destroys both individuals involved. Jung observed that women who fall into this pattern often unconsciously project their unlived life, their animus, onto their younger partners. They see in these men the vitality, the potential, the unfulfilled dreams they believe they've lost. But here's the crucial point Jung emphasized. This projection isn't love. It's a desperate attempt to avoid confronting their own psychological development and the natural process of individuation. The younger man, meanwhile, often unconsciously seeks a mother figure while simultaneously rebelling against that very dynamic. This creates what Jung termed a complex constellation, where both partners are trapped in unconscious patterns that prevent genuine intimacy and authentic connection. The relationship becomes a psychological prison where neither person can truly grow or develop their authentic self. What Jung discovered through his extensive work with patients was that the most psychologically damaging behavior an older woman can engage in with a younger man is unconsciously becoming what he called the eternal mother. This isn't about being nurturing or caring. This is about a woman who refuses to acknowledge her own aging process and instead attempts to live vicariously through her younger partner's energy and potential. The eternal mother complex manifests in several destructive ways. First, she begins to infantilize her younger partner, treating him as if he cannot make decisions for himself. She offers unsolicited advice constantly, manages his finances, his career choices, even his friendships. Jung noted that this behavior stems from the woman's own terror of psychological death and transformation, which are natural parts of the individuation process. But here's where it gets psychologically fascinating and dangerous. While she's mothering him, she's simultaneously competing with him. She dresses younger, tries to match his energy levels, and often becomes jealous of his peers or other women his age. This creates what Jung termed a double bind, where the younger man feels both smothered and abandoned, nurtured and competed against. Jung believed that this behavior activates the most primitive aspects of both partners' psyches. The woman regresses to a pre-individuated state, where her identity becomes completely dependent on controlling and shaping another person. The younger man, meanwhile, often develops what Jung called a mother complex that can cripple his ability to form healthy relationships throughout his life. The shadow aspect of this dynamic is particularly insidious. The older woman often projects her own unlived potential onto her younger partner, but when he fails to fulfill her projections, she becomes resentful and critical. She begins to see him as ungrateful, immature, or disappointing, never recognizing that she's actually angry at her own unlived life and missed opportunities. Jung observed that women caught in this pattern often exhibit what he called reverse individuation. Instead of moving toward greater psychological wholeness and self-acceptance, they move backward, trying to recapture earlier stages of their psychological development. This is not only futile, but actively destructive to both partners' psychological growth. The younger man often becomes what Jung termed a provisional life for the older woman. She begins to live through his experiences, his successes, his youth, rather than confronting her own need for psychological development. This prevents her from accessing what Jung considered the greatest gift of mature femininity, the wise woman archetype, the crone who has integrated her shadow and can offer genuine wisdom rather than controlling manipulation. Perhaps the most dangerous psychological phenomenon Jung identified in relationships between older women and younger men is what he called animus possession. This occurs when a woman becomes completely identified with her inner masculine principle, the animus, and uses it as a weapon against her younger partner. Jung warned that this is the fastest way to destroy not only the relationship, but both individuals' psychological development. When an older woman falls into animus possession with a younger man, she becomes what Jung described as opinionated, argumentative, and dogmatic. She constantly criticizes his choices, challenges his masculinity, and attempts to prove her intellectual or practical superiority. This isn't healthy debate or constructive feedback. This is psychological warfare disguised as relationship dynamics. Jung observed that women experiencing animus possession often justify their behavior by claiming they're helping their younger partner grow or mature. They convince themselves that their criticism is educational, that their dominance is necessary for his development. But Jung understood that this rationalization masks a deeper psychological truth. The woman is terrified of her own feminine power and is using her animus to avoid confronting her authentic self. The younger man in this dynamic often responds in one of two equally destructive ways. Either he becomes passive and resentful, allowing himself to be psychologically castrated, or he becomes rebellious and aggressive, engaging in what Jung called animus battles, where both partners fight using their least developed psychological functions. Neither response leads to genuine intimacy or psychological growth. What makes this pattern particularly insidious is that animus possession often masquerades as strength and independence. The older woman may appear confident and self-assured, but Jung recognized that true psychological strength comes from integration, not domination. When a woman is possessed by her animus, she's actually in a state of psychological inflation, disconnected from her authentic feminine wisdom. Jung emphasized that the animus, when properly integrated, serves as a bridge to a woman's creative and intellectual capacities. But when it becomes possessive, it cuts her off from her intuitive wisdom, her emotional intelligence, and her capacity for genuine relationship. She becomes a caricature of masculinity rather than an integrated woman who can access both her feminine and masculine qualities. The tragedy of animus possession in these relationships is that it prevents the older woman from offering what could be her greatest gift, the wisdom that comes from having lived through multiple life transitions. Instead of sharing her hard-earned insights with gentle authority, she becomes a psychological tyrant who uses her experience as a weapon rather than a source of genuine guidance. Jung believed that women who fall into this trap are often those who have spent their earlier years suppressing their animus, either through overly traditional roles or through fear of their own power. When they finally encounter a situation where they feel they can express this energy, it erupts in an uncontrolled and destructive manner. Jung identified another critically dangerous pattern that older women must never engage in with younger men, unconsciously treating them as what he called the puer aeternus, or eternal child. This psychological archetype represents the part of the masculine psyche that refuses to grow up, take responsibility, or commit to adult life. When an older woman projects this archetype onto her younger partner, she creates a toxic dynamic that stunts both their psychological development. The shadow projection aspect of this pattern is particularly destructive. The older woman often sees in her younger partner all the irresponsibility, immaturity, and lack of commitment that she has spent her life avoiding or suppressing in herself. Instead of recognizing these as her own shadow qualities, she projects them onto him and then tries to fix or control these perceived flaws. This creates what Jung called a shadow dance, where neither partner can see their authentic self. Jung observed that women who fall into this pattern often have an unconscious need to be needed. They choose younger men who appear to lack direction or stability, then position themselves as the wise guide who will help them mature. But here's the psychological trap. By constantly rescuing and managing her younger partner, she prevents him from developing his own psychological strength and prevents herself from confronting her own need for control and significance. The poor Iternus dynamic becomes particularly toxic when the older woman begins to enable destructive behaviors while simultaneously resenting them. She might financially support a younger man who won't commit to steady work, then become angry about his lack of ambition. She might encourage his artistic dreams while secretly believing he'll never succeed, then feel vindicated when he struggles. This creates what Jung termed a psychological double-bind, where the woman is both savior and saboteur. Jung emphasized that this pattern often attracts women who have spent their lives being overly responsible, practical, and grounded. The younger man's apparent freedom from conventional expectations triggers both envy and a desire to vicariously experience the spontaneity and possibility she feels she sacrificed. But instead of reclaiming these qualities within herself, she lives them through him while simultaneously trying to destroy them. The most insidious aspect of this dynamic is that it prevents the younger man from encountering what Jung called necessary suffering. By constantly rescuing him from consequences, providing financial safety nets, and solving his problems, the older woman robs him of the very experiences that would foster genuine maturity and psychological development. She becomes an enabler disguised as a helper. Jung believed that women caught in this pattern are often avoiding their own shadow work. Rather than confronting their own areas of immaturity, irresponsibility, or unfulfilled dreams, they project these qualities onto their partner and then engage in what appears to be therapeutic relationship work, but is actually psychological avoidance. They become the responsible one, the mature one, the wise one, while never having to face their own psychological gaps. The tragedy is that both partners become trapped in roles that prevent authentic intimacy. The woman becomes a pseudo-mother or therapist, while the man becomes a pseudo-child or patient. Neither can relate to the other as an equal adult capable of genuine partnership, mutual support, and shared growth. The most profound mistake an older woman can make with a younger man, according to Jung's deepest insights, is to unconsciously sabotage both her own and her partner's individuation process. Individuation, Jung's term for the psychological journey toward wholeness and authentic self-realization, requires each person to confront their shadow, integrate their anima or animus, and develop their unique personality, separate from collective expectations and projections. When an older woman enters a relationship with a younger man while avoiding her own individuation work, she creates what Jung called a psychological merger, where both individuals lose touch with their authentic selves. Instead of two whole people choosing to share their lives, you have two incomplete people trying to create wholeness through each other. This is doomed to fail and causes immense psychological damage to both parties. Jung observed that older women often unconsciously choose younger men specifically because these relationships allow them to avoid the difficult work of late-life individuation. The midlife transition requires confronting mortality, accepting physical changes, reevaluating life choices, and often grieving unlived possibilities. A relationship with a younger man can feel like an escape from these necessary but painful psychological tasks. But here's what Jung understood that most people miss. By avoiding her own individuation process, the older woman not only stunts her own psychological growth, but actively prevents her younger partner from beginning his own journey toward authenticity. She becomes what Jung termed an individuation obstacle, rather than a supportive partner in mutual growth. The sabotage often manifests in subtle but devastating ways. When the younger man attempts to establish boundaries, pursue his own interests, or make independent decisions, the older woman may unconsciously undermine these efforts through emotional manipulation, financial control, or psychological pressure. She may claim to support his growth while actually fearing any change that might threaten their dynamic. If you're finding these psychological insights fascinating and want to dive deeper into Jung's revolutionary understanding of human relationships and consciousness, make sure you're subscribed to our channel and hit that notification bell. We're constantly exploring the hidden patterns that shape our emotional lives, and the content we're sharing could transform how you understand yourself and your relationships. Jung believed that true love requires two individuated people who choose each other from a place of wholeness rather than need. When an older woman uses a younger man to avoid her own psychological development, she's not offering love, but rather what he called psychological vampirism. She feeds off his youth, energy, and potential while giving him nothing but her own unprocessed psychological material. The younger man, meanwhile, often becomes trapped in what Jung called provisional life, always preparing to live authentically, but never actually beginning that journey. The older woman's presence, while seeming supportive, actually enables him to avoid the necessary confrontations with life that would force his own individuation process to begin. While Jung identified the psychological dangers that older women face in relationships with younger men, he also offered a profound alternative vision. He believed that a mature woman who has done her individuation work could offer something incredibly valuable to a younger partner, the archetype of the wise woman, the integrated feminine who has transformed her experiences into genuine wisdom rather than controlling manipulation. Jung's concept of the wise woman represents a woman who has successfully navigated what he called the afternoon of life. She has confronted her shadow, integrated her animus, processed her regrets and disappointments, and emerged with what Jung termed earned authority. This is not the authority of control or dominance, but the natural authority that comes from having lived consciously and learned from both success and failure. When an older woman embodies this archetype authentically, her relationship with a younger man becomes what Jung called a container for transformation, rather than a prison of projection. She can offer guidance without controlling, share wisdom without lecturing, and provide stability without stifling growth. Most importantly, she can love without needing to possess or change her partner. Jung observed that the wise woman archetype includes what he called the capacity for sacred detachment. This doesn't mean emotional distance or lack of caring. Instead, it means the ability to love someone fully while allowing them the freedom to make their own choices, even when those choices might lead to pain or separation. This level of psychological maturity is rare, but incredibly powerful when authentically embodied. The key difference Jung identified is that the wise woman has processed her own youth, grief, and unfulfilled dreams rather than trying to live them through her partner. She has what Jung called psychological completion in these areas, which allows her to appreciate her partner's youth without envying it, support his dreams without needing to control their outcome, and offer her experience without imposing her values. Jung believed that relationships between psychologically mature older women and younger men could actually serve the individuation process for both partners. The woman gets to experience the joy of mentoring and sharing her hard-earned wisdom, while the younger man benefits from the stability, perspective, and emotional intelligence that comes from a partner who has already done significant psychological work. However, Jung was clear that this positive dynamic is only possible when the older woman has genuinely completed what he called her shadow work and achieved what he termed psychological sovereignty. She must be in the relationship by choice rather than need, offering her gifts freely rather than as a way to maintain control or significance in someone else's life. The wise woman can recognize when her younger partner needs space for his own growth experiences, even when those experiences don't include her. She can celebrate his achievements without taking credit, support his struggles without rescuing him from necessary learning, and love him without trying to shape him. According to her vision of who he should become, Jung's ultimate message about relationships between older women and younger men wasn't simply a list of what not to do, but rather a profound call to consciousness. He believed that every relationship, regardless of age dynamics, offers an opportunity for psychological growth and deeper self-understanding, but only when both partners approach the relationship with genuine self-awareness and commitment to their own individuation process. The patterns we've explored, the eternal mother complex, animus possession, shadow projection, and individuation sabotage, are not moral failings, but rather unconscious psychological mechanisms that emerge when we haven't done the necessary inner work. Jung emphasized that becoming conscious of these patterns is the first step toward transformation. The older woman who recognizes these tendencies in herself has already begun the journey toward healthier relationship dynamics. Jung believed that the second half of life presents unique opportunities for psychological integration that aren't available in youth. The older woman who has experienced loss, disappointment, success, and change has raw material for wisdom that her younger self simply couldn't access. But this potential wisdom must be consciously processed and integrated, not left as unconscious reactive patterns that get projected onto partners. The key insight Jung offered is that authentic love requires what he called conscious suffering. This means willingly confronting the parts of ourselves that are immature, controlling, needy, or destructive, rather than trying to fix these qualities in our partners. When an older woman does this work, she becomes capable of loving a younger man without trying to change him, control him, or live through him. Jung also recognized that younger men who are attracted to older women often carry their own unconscious patterns, perhaps seeking the mother they never had, avoiding the challenges of relationships with peers, or trying to bypass their own individuation work through association with someone who appears more psychologically developed. Conscious relationship requires both partners to examine their motivations honestly. The practical application of Jung's insights begins with what he called active imagination and honest self-reflection. Before entering or continuing a relationship with a younger man, an older woman might ask herself, "Am I seeking this relationship from a place of wholeness or neediness? Am I trying to recapture my youth or share my wisdom? Do I want to control this person's development or support their authentic growth? Am I projecting my unlived life onto them or offering genuine love?" Jung believed that consciousness transforms everything. The same behaviors that are destructive when unconscious can become healing when brought into awareness. An older woman who recognizes her tendency toward maternal control can transform this energy into genuine nurturing. One who sees her animus possession can learn to integrate her masculine qualities constructively rather than using them as weapons. The ultimate goal, according to Jung, is what he called psychological marriage, a union between two individuals who have done enough inner work to relate authentically rather than through projections, complexes, and unconscious patterns. This is possible between people of any age difference when both are committed to consciousness and growth. Remember, Jung's insights aren't meant to discourage relationships between older women and younger men, but rather to illuminate the unconscious patterns that can make any relationship destructive. With awareness, intention, and commitment to personal growth, these relationships can become profound opportunities for mutual healing, learning, and love.